G'day guys, I am out today at Wembley in Western Australia. I am at our recently completed subdivision. Now this is a follow-on video from the renovation video that I posted earlier. This is about the subdivision and development side of the project. Now you might be looking to start a subdivision as part of your property investment portfolio, or you might have a rear lot that you want to subdivide off your existing home and you want to know the core steps to take. So in this video I'm going to go through the specific steps that you need to take in order to be able to subdivide a lot. It's a high level understanding. Each state is different, each council is different. So if you comment below, I will give you the answers. And if I don't know the answers about your particular council or state, what I'll do is I'll put you in touch with who can answer those questions. If you like free knowledge so that you can do it yourself, like this video so that it bumps it up in the search rankings and more people can understand how to do this stuff. In Western Australia, it costs about $25,000 to $30,000 to complete a subdivision when there are no modifications to a house. In other states, it's closer to $30,000 to $40,000, and I've heard in some areas it's up to about $60,000. There is 3 different types of titles that you can apply for when you're subdividing your property. The first one is green title. This basically means that all of the mains, utilities connect to all of the blocks. The next type is survey strata. It's like a traditional green title lot, but the difference is that the utilities often come off one connection. The final type is a built strata. Now this is mainly with apartment development, but we're focusing on the building mainly. There is a slight variation with subdivision. It's called a vacant lot built strata. That gives you a high level understanding of subdivision. So straight into how do you conduct a subdivision. Step 1 is to go out and get a contour and feature survey. You want to know where the house is located, you want to know the topography of the lot. From there, that surveyor can often complete a subdivision plan, which is basically a draft of how the boundaries are going to look like on each of the individual lots. In each state, the planning regulations are slightly different, so a good surveyor in your state will be able to direct you to what planning regulations are the most relevant. This area will cost you about $1,000 to get the survey and about $2,500 to do the actual plan, preparing all the documents for lodgement. Now, in some states, I know that you need civil engineering reports done or civil engineering plans done. This obviously will add to cost. Allow about 3 months to get the conditional approval. And what a conditional approval basically is that you can subdivide the lot provided you meet all the conditions. So the things I'm talking about, such as providing access from the main property, connecting your sewer line, is the things that you would need to do in order to satisfy those conditions. I'd like to just quickly touch on council contributions. Often if you call your local government, they'll give you an understanding of council contribution costs. They can be quite expensive. So for example, in Western Australia, the cost for a council contribution for public open space is about 10% of the unimproved land value. What I always say is if there is things like modifications to a house that need to be done, start with them early, start with them in the planning and design phase, and make sure that you are lodging with council for any changes to the house as soon as possible, because this might be the longest delay in the project. In this example here, we actually had to structurally modify this home to allow for a truncation. Now, if you dial back to the renovation video, this is one of my examples of a mistake I made. Now, I didn't make a mistake per se because we were aware of it in due diligence, but what I had to do was include the cosmetic renovations I was doing into the building contract, because all of a sudden the building works on this house went above $20,000, and that means under the Building Code of Australia you should be getting a licensed builder to complete the work. So this modification probably was about $40,000 in total, and we're talking only about probably 3 meters by 2 meters, so 6 square meters of area. I want to talk about the site works. Now, the civil site works are things such as retaining. In this example, this block height difference between the front lot and the back lot is about 1/2 meter. What we did was we got the brickie in that was doing the structural wall to be able to put a structural retaining wall. Now, again, under the BCA, if this wall was over 1/2 meter high, we would more than likely need some form of planning approval, and we'd also need some engineer to sign off that the wall is going to stand up. So again, getting back to your Building works, being early on in the project, make sure if you've got any retaining works which are going to be significant, you get onto them as well and lodge them with council so that it doesn't slow down your project later on. The next thing in civil works is access to the property. This is a rear battle axe subdivision and it's a strata lot, so we're providing access to the main street. The other thing underground, which is the main cost of this, is the soak wells. So more and more councils are requiring you to keep stormwater on site. Here costs about $7,000 in total, so they are big lumpy costs. Allow about $60 a square metre for the concrete, and then add a couple of $1,000s per soak well on top of that to supply and install. The other thing I wanted to touch on is some councils may allow you to use road base to access the rear of the lot, but in this council we weren't allowed to do that. So some councils understand that services need to go in after when they're building the house. One requirement which is common in Western Australia and across the board is connection to main sewer if it is available. So it's important in due diligence just to make sure where the sewer line runs to get an understanding of how much the cost is going to be to connect up to it. In this lot, we are fortunate it's in the back and rear of the property. The other thing to look out for is the depth of the sewer run. So I've had one example where we had a 4.5 metre deep sewer where water level was at about 2.5 metres, meaning we had to de-water. So it turned a $3,500 sewer connection job in, which is roughly what this cost, up to about $17,000 once you got in the other trades. So just make sure the location and the depth of the sewer is okay. The other thing to touch on is contributions when you connect up to a sewer. It's not free. So in Western Australia, we have to make a drainage payment of about $6,500. So that brings me on to earthworks. In each council, it's a little bit different, but here it was pretty basic. What we need to do is demolish all the structures that were on this rear lot. We were to remove all foliage. We then had to rake to 600 depth with a digger and pull out anything underneath the soil. There has been some things growing, so we will get that whipper snipped. And that was all we had to do. So it was fairly inexpensive, apart from demolishing a garage. Allow about $6,000 for removing, say, 300 square metres of foliage, but then the demo to the back garage can be quite a bit more. In many states and a lot of councils in Western Australia, you do need to get a Geotech report. We didn't have to on this project, but basically a Geotech report is when they put devices in the soil, check for the type of soil that is under it. If there is a reactive soil such as clay or peat or a range of other factors, they want to check for the debris within the soil, so if it's suitable for building on, and they want to check compaction. And if you have a Geotech report done, it's highly likely that you will need to do some modifications to the soil. In most areas, that will be raking to 600 anyway, but then it might be some compaction on top of that. So you need to allow for potentially getting a Geotech, which is about $1,500. Then the earthworks, which can range depending on the slope of the block. There's things like retaining to add into that. Then once you have the earthworks done, you have to get the Geotech back out to check that the works that you've done are sufficient to get up to a grade of soil that will pass your subdivision clearance conditions. As we're starting to wrap things up, what other things are there to look at? Well, fencing is worth mentioning. Often for the parent lot, it's not a requirement, but when you're subdividing the lots between them, I always recommend that you split the lots off with a fence. The only exclusion to that is if you are doing street front lots where you are showing the space and the size. We actually played a little trick where we got an extra height colour bond fence so that we hid the retaining wall that's underneath here at about 30 centimetres deep, and then on the other side the wall is about the same height as a normal colour bond fence, even though they're about 30 centimetres higher than this rear lot. And while I'm here, this is a great show of the structural modifications to the house that we completed. While I'm walking to the front of the property to talk about power connection, I just wanted to touch on access to the rear lot. In every single state, there's a different guideline as to what is the acceptable width to allow for access. In Western Australia, for an existing dwelling to be retained, it's 3 metres, and if it's a new house, it might be 4 metres. The cost to set up underground power depends on the distance that the green dome is from the closest overhead power. If there's existing underground power on your street, it's probably $500–600 connection fee, provided there's a green dome that can be accessed by the rear lot. If there is overhead power on your street and the power line runs along your side of the street, allow about $3,500 for a connection, and if the power line runs on the other side of the street, allow about $5,500. But again, similar to council application fees, they'll continue to rise. So just jump on their website, they'll give you a guidance as the cost. Often access is one thing that councils do consider in terms of the recommendations that they put to the state government. In this example, we actually had to have the front property having hardstand parking off the rear property's access leg, because it's actually a common property access leg, so we couldn't have a separate hardstand parking area coming off the main street for the front lot. And this means that you need to consider things such as turning circles if you're going to have enough space, and we had to put in a gate to create some privacy and separation between the two lots. The other quirk is that some councils will want you to screen windows that overlook the common property. It might be as simple as roller shutters, or they may want a permanent screen such as frosting above a certain level of height. As you progress through your subdivision clearances, you may move your application from planning into council's engineering. Engineering look at a few different things. I'm just going to touch on some key areas. Firstly, it's your crossover, because this is the verge. This is a council's asset, so they may want you to pull out an old bitumen verge or a verge that's no longer usable anymore and make good, or replace it with a new one. The other thing is, if you're having heavy machinery on site and you damage the footpath, you may have a verge bond that you either don't have returned, or you need to reinstate and fix up the footpath that is damaged. The final thing is, if there is a mains storm water line that runs on your side of the street, your soak wells on site may need to be connected up to the council main drains. Now that you have your conditions satisfied, such as connecting up with all your utilities, keeping the council happy with the conditions that they've imposed, and engineering and council's happy with how you've left the state of the verge, the final step in the chain is to get your surveyor back on site. They will peg the area. I always like to encourage that this is the final step. Now, it can be done sooner, but if you have earthworks guys on site and they're moving bobcats around, they can knock these pegs over. The cost of pegging out a site is about $4,000, depending on the size, the area. They'll also complete all the paperwork that needs to be submitted to the Planning Commission in order for you to obtain those titles. You have now completed all the works on site. The next steps are pretty much out of your control. Your surveyor or planner will submit all the paperwork to the necessary authorities. They'll then come out and inspect the property. Once these have all been collated, they'll be submitted to your titles office, which will then release the titles for the two lots. As always, doing something for the first time is a little bit daunting, and a good surveyor would certainly be able to give you guidance on what the entire process should look like in your state